There is a line Russia has relied on for decades. The farther you move away from the battlefield, the safer Russia becomes. That assumption is built into the geography of the country itself. Thousands of miles of territory. Strategic bases hidden deep inside the Russian interior. Air defense networks designed to protect the most valuable military facilities. And beyond all of that, Russia's space infrastructure, where some of the country's most sensitive military and strategic programs are carried out. But that assumption is now being challenged. Because Ukraine has demonstrated that distance may no longer be enough to protect Russia's most important assets. The latest shock came at Plesetsk, a Russian space facility located roughly 1,800 to 1,900 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, was reportedly targeted by a long-range drone operation. That number matters. This was not an attack somewhere near the front. It was not a strike on a military position a few dozen miles behind Russian lines. It was an operation aimed at one of Russia's most strategically important facilities, deep inside territory that Moscow has traditionally considered part of its protected rear. And if Ukraine can reach a facility like Plesetsk, the implications extend far beyond one damaged site. Because Plesetsk is connected to Russia's military space program, satellite infrastructure, and strategic missile testing. That makes this story much bigger than another drone attack. It is about whether Russia can still guarantee that its most important military assets are safe simply because they are far away. To understand why this matters, you first have to understand what Plesetsk represents. Russia operates several major space facilities. Plesetsk is one of the central locations for military space activity. Baikonur represents the historic legacy of the Russian and Soviet space programs, and Vostochny represents Moscow's attempt to build a new generation of independent launch infrastructure. For the Kremlin, these facilities are more than launch sites. They represent technological power. They represent strategic reach. And, perhaps most importantly, they support the image that Russia's military power can survive almost any attempt to penetrate its territory. That image is especially important when nuclear weapons are involved. Russia's strategic deterrence depends on weapons capable of crossing enormous distances in a matter of minutes. Intercontinental ballistic missiles are at the center of that equation. And the infrastructure required to develop, test, and support those systems cannot simply be moved whenever an enemy gains the ability to attack it. That is why the reported strike on Plesetsk carries such symbolic weight. The facility was established in 1957 as an ICBM base. Over time, it evolved into one of the world's most important northern launch facilities. Its location allows Russia to conduct missions toward high-inclination and polar orbits. But its military importance goes even further. Plesetsk is also associated with testing Russia's RS-28 Sarmat strategic missile, the weapon that NATO has famously referred to as Satan II. So when Ukraine attempts to reach this location, it is not simply demonstrating that a drone can fly a long distance. It is demonstrating that strategic infrastructure associated with Russia's nuclear deterrent may also be within reach. And that creates a completely different problem for Moscow. Because Plesetsk is not undefended. Far from it. The area is protected by layers of air defense systems. Long-range S-400 systems are designed to engage aircraft and cruise missiles at considerable distances. Closer to the facility, systems such as Bukom-3 and Torum-2 provide additional protection. Then there are short-range systems, such as Pantsir variants designed to defend against threats that manage to get through the outer layers. Electronic warfare equipment and radar networks add another layer. In theory, this should make the approach extremely difficult. But long-range drone warfare does not always work like a conventional air attack. A traditional aircraft has to survive a continuous engagement with the enemy's defensive network. A large drone swarm can create a different problem. It can force the defender to decide which targets matter most. And that is where Ukraine's reported tactic becomes important. According to the source account, a large number of Ukrainian unmanned aircraft were used in the operation. Russian air defenses reportedly claimed that approximately 40 Ukrainian drones were destroyed. At first glance, that sounds like a Russian defensive success, but there is another possibility. The drones may have been used to overload the defensive network. Think of it as a problem of attention. If dozens of objects appear at the same time, the defender has to detect them, classify them, track them, and decide which ones represent the actual threat. Even if most of those drones are destroyed, the remaining aircraft may create the opening the attacker needs. And that is reportedly what happened. While Russian defenses were dealing with multiple targets, the actual strike elements allegedly continued toward Plesetsk. The source claims that at least 2 drones managed to reach the area. Local reports then described smoke around the facility. But the most important number was not 2, it was the distance. Approximately 1,800 to 1,900 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. That would make the operation one of the deepest reported Ukrainian drone strikes inside Russian territory since the beginning of the war. And that distance changes the strategic calculation, because Russia cannot defend thousands of kilometers of territory simply by placing another air defense battery everywhere. Every new location that Moscow decides to protect requires equipment, it requires personnel, it requires radar coverage, it requires ammunition, and it requires maintenance. The deeper Ukraine can reach, the more difficult that equation becomes. The immediate reaction reportedly demonstrated just how seriously Russian authorities viewed the threat. Air raid warnings were activated, flights were grounded, mobile internet services were restricted. The so-called carpet plan was reportedly implemented in response to the attack. For Russia, this creates a second problem beyond physical damage: psychology. A facility that was considered secure suddenly has to operate under the assumption that Ukraine may be capable of reaching it, and that affects how Russia plans future operations. Plesetsk is important because of what happens there. The facility supports the launch of Soyuz 2 and Angara rockets. Those rockets are associated with Russia's military and intelligence satellite architecture. Among the systems connected to this infrastructure are satellites used for signals intelligence and optical reconnaissance. Russia also depends on satellite communications to support operations far away from its territory. In modern warfare, that infrastructure is increasingly difficult to separate from battlefield power. But it can provide the information that tells another system where to look. It can provide communications. It can support targeting. It can help coordinate forces over enormous distances. Take away enough of that infrastructure, and an army can become slower, less informed, and less coordinated. That is why Ukraine's reported targeting of Russia's space infrastructure appears to be part of something broader. The strategy is not simply to destroy launch pads. It is to attack the entire chain: production, launch, ground control, communication, and eventually the battlefield systems that depend on all of them. The Sarmat program makes the situation even more sensitive. The RS-28 Sarmat is described as a massive liquid-fueled intercontinental ballistic missile. The source gives it a weight of roughly 208 tons and a range of approximately 18,000 kilometers. It is designed to carry multiple nuclear warheads. That makes it one of the most important components of Russia's strategic nuclear arsenal. But the Sarmat program has also faced serious setbacks. The source points to major incidents during testing in 2023 and 2024. One particularly destructive incident reportedly occurred at the Yubilynaya silo in September 2024, where an explosion destroyed launch infrastructure and left a large crater. Now consider what happens when the testing environment itself becomes vulnerable. Russia can continue to possess nuclear missiles, but the infrastructure supporting testing, development, and deployment becomes harder to protect, and that creates a strategic dilemma. Moscow may have to reinforce these facilities. More air defense may have to move away from other locations. More resources may have to be dedicated to protecting assets thousands of kilometers from the front. That creates opportunities elsewhere. If Russia moves defensive systems toward its strategic facilities, fewer systems may remain available to protect troops, ammunition depots, and command centers closer to Ukraine. This is one of the most important consequences of long-range drone warfare. The attacker does not necessarily need to destroy everything. Sometimes forcing the defender to spread itself across a massive territory is enough, and Ukraine appears to be pushing that problem further. The reported Plesetsk operation was not isolated. According to the source, Ukraine has also been targeting other parts of Russia's space and communications infrastructure. On August 15, 2026, Ukrainian forces reportedly struck the Progress Rocket and Space Center in the Samara region. The facility is described as a major industrial center associated with Soyuz 2 rocket production. The source says FP-5 Flamingo cruise missiles struck electronics and assembly buildings. Earlier, in June 2026, Ukraine reportedly targeted space communication centers in Dubna and Vladimir. Large communications antennas and military modem facilities were allegedly damaged by kamikaze drones. If these attacks are viewed individually, they look like separate incidents. But put them together and a pattern emerges. Production facilities are being targeted.